And welcome in today's Business Matters. Could a three-peat for the Chiefs be a snooze for fans? The cheapest ticket price for Super Bowl 59 has fallen below $4,000 on the secondary market. Reseller TickPick is tracking a 30% decline over the past week and a more than 50% drop compared to last year's record-breaking game. And this Sunday, the Kansas City Chiefs will take on the Philadelphia Eagles at the Caesars Superdome in New Orleans. TickPick's CEO is pointing to a number of factors for the decreased demand. Number one, cheap fatigue. The team is hoping to score a record 3 championship rings in a row. Also, the chosen arena has larger capacity than last year, and the city of New Orleans is still reeling from a recent terror attack. Meanwhile, OPEC Plus will not be updating its output despite President Trump pushing for the organization to bring down prices. The group of oil-producing countries agreed to stick with its policy to gradually raise oil output starting in April. It also removed U.S. government data from its sources used to monitor its production. OPEC Plus and Trump clashed repeatedly during his first administration. And now, back in office, Trump is arguing that elevated gas prices have helped Russia continue its war in Ukraine. The U.S. government could become a possible new owner of TikTok. Today, President Trump signed an executive order to create a sovereign wealth fund within the next year. There were a few details about how such a fund would work, but he said it could potentially buy the popular video app. Typically, these kinds of funds rely on a country's budget surplus to make investments, but the U.S. operates at a deficit. In the past, Trump has floated that such funds could be financed by tariffs. The creation of the Sovereign Wealth Fund will likely require approval from Congress. European stocks fell during early trade in France, Germany, and Britain today amid Trump's tariff threats. The head of a portfolio management firm explains the potential impact.
And that will certainly fuel inflation on the one hand, but on the other hand, it will also encourage consumers to perhaps consume less. So, for now, the danger of an economic contraction is just around the corner, and that is the problem that Trump also has to deal with. So if he wants to make deals, he has to act quickly now to avoid shooting himself in the foot.
And he went on to say that Trump is a deal maker, and on top of that, described his tariff threat as a negotiating tactic. He pointed to worries over their potential impact as to why the market dipped earlier today. Germany's DAX index opened around 2% lower this morning. A judgment upheld in a lengthy legal battle with the chairman of Samsung. Jay Lee has been found not guilty of accounting fraud and stock manipulation. He will now be able to focus again on leading the world's top memory chip and smartphone maker. Lee has faced legal challenges for nearly a decade, including from this case. A lower court has cleared Lee of all charges related to a 2015 merger between two Samsung affiliates. The Seoul High Court upheld the ruling. Critics argue the decision showed leniency to Lee, who's been accused of tightening his grip at the company at the expense of the country's pension fund and other investors. Cases down, pressure up. Pfizer is struggling to impress investors with its non-COVID products. Revenue for the drug maker climbed to nearly $60 billion during its pandemic peak. Now its stock is trading at less than half its pandemic-era highs. And adding pressure to that, to Pfizer, is health experts pointing to signs of a much smaller wave of COVID-19 cases this winter in the U.S. compared to previous years. COVID products are still a profit driver for the company, but investors are looking for improved performance from other products like Pfizer's cancer drugs, for example. And OpenAI CEO Sam Altman and SoftBank Group's Masayoshi Son met the Japanese Prime Minister in Tokyo today. That's after agreeing to set up a joint venture to offer artificial intelligence services to corporate customers. It will be owned by OpenAI and a company established by SoftBank and its domestic telecoms arm. The Japanese investment giant will also pay $3 billion annually to use OpenAI's technology across SoftBank Group companies. Picking up and moving. Taiwan said it will support companies that plan to relocate to the U.S. after President Trump announced new tariffs. Additional levies have been added on imports from Mexico, Canada, and China as well. Taiwan's companies are in a vulnerable situation. Not only are they key producers for critical tech products with manufactories in Mexico and China, President Trump has also threatened tariffs on imported chips. In a statement, Taiwan's economy ministry said it will provide information to help companies affected by new tariffs. This includes U.S. states to invest in local laws and assistance in finding partners. And Taiwan has banned its government agencies from using DeepSeek, a Chinese AI model like ChatGPT, and it's citing security concerns. In a statement issued today, the Taiwanese government said the Chinese AI model poses risks of information leakage and other security concerns. But zooming out, besides Taiwan, countries like Italy, South Korea, France, Belgium, and the United States have all raised concerns about whether the Chinese AI model would leak their user data to Beijing. And some countries are already preparing a probe against the company's operation. More on the impact of Trump's tariff moves. Cryptocurrency prices slid today, with Bitcoin at a 3-week low. The risk of a trade war spooked investors and caused a sell-off across financial markets. Here's more.
Bitcoin hit a low of $91,441 overnight. Smaller cryptocurrency Ether has lost nearly a quarter in value since Friday. Over the weekend, President Donald Trump imposed 25% tariffs on Mexican and most Canadian imports and 10% on goods from China starting Tuesday. Canada and Mexico vowed retaliatory measures. China said it would challenge Trump's levies at the World Trade Organization. Industry data shows almost a quarter of the 100 largest cryptocurrencies have lost a fifth or more in value over the last 24 hours. Data also showed Trump's own cryptocurrency slid below $20. The coin was launched shortly before Trump's inauguration and initially surged, hitting highs above $73.
Hello, Bitcoiners.
There is added downward pressure on crypto after a strong rally in the wake of Trump's election. Some investors have felt disappointed at the lack of immediate moves to boost crypto or loosen regulations since he took office. Bitcoin touched a record high over $107,000 on January 20th when Trump was sworn in as president.
And Stellantis is making sharp maneuvers over management as it searches for a new CEO. The world's fourth largest automaker announced a number of changes. This includes one with CEO candidate Antonio Filosa. He is the head of North American operations and will be adding global chief for quality to his plate. Now, the restructuring comes after former CEO Carlos Tavares abruptly quit in December. This was over differences with leading shareholders after a profit warning. In a statement, the company's interim executive reiterated that the search for a permanent CEO is well underway and is expected to conclude in the first half of this year. Meanwhile, the Chinese regime has denounced the Trump administration's tariffs. Trump imposed the 10% tariff on Chinese goods on Saturday. Trump said China has to stop the flow of fentanyl into the United States. The Biden administration also called out the Chinese regime on shipments of the chemicals needed to make fentanyl. The Chinese Communist Party says fentanyl is America's problem. The regime will challenge the tariffs at the World Trade Organizations. Beijing's finance and commerce ministries also are saying they would take unspecified countermeasures. Now, tariffs put in place by President Trump canceled the de minimis duty-free exemption for products that cost under $800. That is how companies like Temu and Shein have been able to profit from selling extremely cheap items that used to bypass strict import searches and regulation. The de minimis rule also made it easier for fentanyl and precursor chemicals to be shipped into the country. NTD Charles Marshall has more details.
Fast fashion and cheap product haul companies like Shein and Temu could be hit the hardest by President Trump's 10% tariff on imports from China. Trump has revoked the de minimis duty-free exemption for shipments below $800. The Chinese e-commerce giants have been using this loophole to import goods into the U.S. without the usual customs restrictions.
So the biggest hit will be those players as well as Amazon, which ship a lot of those goods into the States. The players that will benefit most from this are companies that make those products domestically, or other companies that may make raw materials or other intermediate inputs that go into the supply chains of the U.S.
Even U.S. companies like Amazon could be affected, as a portion of the company has been exploring this cheap product haul sales structure. But one of the biggest targets of the tariffs is the fentanyl crisis. Imports of fentanyl and its precursor chemicals have taken advantage of the de minimis exemptions to avoid inspections.
The U.S. is really unhappy with the fentanyl use because it's killing Americans. And so we're at the point now where the Trump administration feels emboldened to actually do something about it.
Trump also cited the large number of immigrants who enter the U.S. illegally from Mexico and Canada.
We're thinking in terms of 25% on Mexico and Canada because they're allowing vast numbers of people. Canada's a very bad abuser also. Vast numbers of people to come in and fentanyl to come in.
President Trump, if cartels are now going to be seen as foreign terror organizations, would you think about ordering U.S. Special Forces into Mexico to take them out?
Could happen. Stranger things have happened.
On Sunday, February 1st, Trump ordered 25% tariffs on Canadian and Mexican imports and 10% on goods from China starting on Tuesday, February 4th. Trump has declared a national emergency over fentanyl and illegal immigration and said that the tariffs will remain in place until the emergency ends, though he placed a 1-month hold on the tariffs on Mexico. As after Mexico agreed on Monday to reinforce its northern border with 10,000 National Guard troops to slow down the flow of illegal drugs. The agreement also includes a U.S. commitment to prevent trafficking of high-powered weapons to Mexico. Sean Marshall, NTD News.
Next, lawyers for Alphabet's Google and Fortnite maker Epic Games are set to square off in an appeals court today. Google hopes to reverse a jury verdict and a judge's order forcing it to revamp its App Store. Epic sued the tech giant in 2020 over its alleged monopoly on how consumers access apps on Android devices. In October, District Judge James Donato ordered Google to restore competition by allowing users to download rival app stores within its Play Store. Now, Google has argued that its Play Store is in constant competition with Apple's App Store. The company said that in its appeal that Donato was wrong to issue an order affecting users and developers nationwide, not just Epic. The order is on hold as the Ninth Circuit considers Google's appeal. And the U.S. dollar surged past Canadian and Mexican currencies as Donald Trump's tariff barrage kicks off. The Canadian dollar and Mexican peso slumped to multi-year lows, while the China's yuan dipped as well. Some analysts believe Canada and Mexico's economies are at risk of recession. The Eurozone economy could face further stagnation as well if tariffs kick in. The euro touched a more than 2-year low, while the Swiss franc slid to its weakest since May. The Australian dollar hit a 5-year low as the New Zealand dollar dropped to its lowest since October 2022. The Japanese yen, on the other hand, remained resilient. Bitcoin was at $95,000, sliding back below $100,000 to its weakest in nearly 3 weeks. And Elon Musk is doubling down on his goal of lowering the deficit by $1 trillion and gives us a list of updates on Doge's progress. Here's more.
On X Spaces Sunday, head of Doge Elon Musk doubled down on his goal of reducing the federal budget deficit by $1 trillion next year. He explains how he believes this will cut down inflation.
We have a $2 trillion deficit, which is far in excess of economic growth. If we can get that deficit in half, from 2 trillion to 1 trillion, and we can get the economic growth to match that 1 trillion growth in the money supply, that means there will be no inflation.
Musk says $1 trillion could be saved just by targeting waste, fraud, and abuse, citing examples like fake people collecting Social Security, fake Medicare payments, and even fraud by foreign entities.
American entitlements are being defrauded by people not even in the U.S. from many other countries because the fraud controls are so weak. There are professional foreign fraud rings operating that are taking somewhere between $100 and $200 billion a year.
Other Doge updates. On Monday morning, 20 government consulting contracts focused on strategic communication and executive coaching were terminated, immediately saving $26 million. In the previous 6 days, the number of building lease terminations increased from 3 to 22. This is for unused government buildings where many work from home, saving $44.6 million. Doge also posted a chart of over 100 DEI-related contract cancellations, showing a grand total of over $1 billion in savings.
Over in Ontario, Canada's most populous province, it's scrapping its $100 million contract with Elon Musk's Starlink. Ontario Premier Doug Ford said he's ripping up the contract and, quote, won't do business with people hell-bent on destroying our economy. Ford signed the large deal last year to bring high-speed internet to rural residents. The move is the latest retaliation since President Trump imposed tariffs on Canada on Saturday. Tariffs are as high as 25% on most goods. On Sunday, Ford called the tariffs illegal and said they will cause inflation for both countries. Ford also said Ontario is banning American companies from provincial contracts. He said that will result in U.S. businesses losing out on tens of billions of dollars in new revenue. Meanwhile, a Japanese family has a creative way to cope with rising prices. It keeps their dinner table simple, satisfying, and cheaper. Here's more.
37-year-old Kazuki Nakata carefully tends to his plants in the small yard outside his home in Kawasaki, Japan. What started as a hobby during the COVID-19 pandemic has become a valuable source of fresh produce for his family as he grows his own vegetables. Cabbage prices in Japan made headlines this month in Tokyo, soaring to 1,000 yen, or nearly $6.50, around the average minimum hourly wage. The staple crop is one of many items driving up the cost of living in a country with stagnant wages. As the cost of living rises, Nakata's family feels the financial benefits of homegrown food more than ever.
I didn't start out with my family's finances in mind, but when I think of how much it helps with the household budget now that prices are going up, I'm glad I got into this hobby.
In 2023, Nakata left his job at an electronics store to focus on growing vegetables. He grows 47 types of vegetables, including lettuce, onions, and daikon radishes, in empty plastic bottles, drink cans, and even his bicycle basket. Nakata also created a YouTube channel where he posts videos about it. It gained around 4,500 new subscribers in the second half of January alone. With vegetable prices where they are, Nakata says the interest is understandable.
Whenever I upload a video, there are loads of positive comments saying things like, wow, or I want to try this too. But I also get comments like, this is really important now that vegetables are so expensive. So I get the feeling that everyone is becoming aware of the issue.
Recent government data show that while agriculture prices have risen, the average vegetable intake among Japanese adults reached an all-time low in November. The Nakata family, however, is going against the trend. They say they're eating more fresh vegetables than ever before.
I feel like the taste of vegetables you've grown from seeds is so many times better than normal. These vegetables are grown with love, so they're different.
Okay, on to Wall Street. Here's what happened today. The major stock indexes closed lower, but partially recovered from initial steeper losses. And that came as U.S. President Donald Trump delayed tariffs on Mexico after his orders to levy tariffs on 3 countries sparked a global scramble to safe haven assets earlier in the day. And of course, all this comes as the stock market had already been pulling back last week after Chinese startup DeepSeek unveiled a breakthrough in cheap artificial intelligence models that sank tech stocks. And that's all for today's Business Matters.